people in the US quit their jobs. That's around 3% of the entire workforce, and this number expands back to 20 million people if measured back to April of 2021. I'm sure you've heard we're in an era called the Great Resignation, where people are quitting their jobs in droves. So in this...
Let's say this robot costs $50,000. They will get their money back within the first 6 months. You want to know why? Because the robot doesn't have to have days off. So this robot's going to be able to work in that warehouse 7 days a week, 24 hours a day. So instead of having a human shift, shift 1, shift 2, and shift 3 of humans, they're going to have one collection of robots to do these things. And it's going to be able to work, and except when it needs to be charged up, that's the only time it's going to not be working. We're about to see an amazing, part of me is excited because I like stuff like this, and part of me is sad because this is going to kill millions of jobs. Millions of jobs. When they can come up with an automated attendant to work in McDonald's, and they may set it up where you may just see the top half and it'll have a human face and human emotions. But I really feel that what's going to happen with McDonald's is you're going to hit a kiosk, you're going to key in your order, and your food's going to slide out of the tray. That's what I think is going to happen with McDonald's, Arby's, Burger King. There'll be 2 humans per restaurant. And hopefully I'm wrong. That crime is going to be so bad because, look, right now, just check your next door, just check your news articles, and see how many of these low-wage workers are stealing money from restaurants. Saying the credit card machine doesn't work, you have to pay cash, and putting the money in their pocket. That's pretty bold and brazen. You want to know why? Because there's cameras all up in there. There's cameras all up in there. Unless they turn the cameras off. I don't know. I've never worked in a restaurant. I don't know what it's like to be a server. When I was in high school, I used to work in the metal fabrication factory. It was called Sign Builders, and we made the signs for Arby's, McDonald's. We had all the equipment. That was my first job. So I never actually worked fast food. I have no clue to what that's like. But in the future, many kids will not know what it's like to work. 20, 30 years from now, kids will not be working fast food because it's all going to be automated. It's going to all be 100% automated. 30 years, that much I am sure on. And one of the things that we're going to see with this automation, and like I said, I'm going to do a whole complete separate video on this, is this going to bring in, I think in the next 10 years, we're going to see UBI, Universal Basic Income, because we have so many people who have nothing to do. They're just here. They have nothing to do. They're not educating themselves. They're not building anything. They're just existing. And what's going to happen, and I don't think they're going to do the universal basic income because they care about people. They're going to start throwing crumbs at these people to keep the crime wave down. That's the...
Welcome back to the channel, and I hope you all are having a great day. Today we have the title of a video that sounds like a blockbuster Hollywood movie. The Revenge of the Low-Wage Workers. So I want to reference the first clips from the first 2 videos, talk a little bit about them. First video comes from, I believe her name is DamiLeeArch. She's an architect who speaks about the Great Resignation. We'll try to leave a link in the description. And the next person, I believe his name is Glendon Campbell, who we're looking at right now. Glendon Campbell, he runs a channel called the Institute of Economic Thought. And he coined this video, The Revenge of the Low-Wage Worker, right? And so I want to speak a little bit about that today in today's video, speak about their videos, give a little commentary on it. So on this channel, we've spoken a great deal about the Great Resignation, right? And of course, as you get the explanation of the Great Resignation in the beginning of the video, if you're not familiar with the term, it is just some phenomena that's happened in recent times where people are quitting their jobs, right? They're quitting their jobs in droves, right? They don't care anymore, right? The how jobs have served as a purpose for many people, purpose to some people's lives. Those things aren't as important to them as it is for some people, and that number seems to keep increasing. And now, what I wanted to point out a little bit and make some corrections about is, even though I kind of feel, yes, this is gonna happen with low wage workers, it is creating that idea of the revenge of the low wage worker. Uh, Even though that's a big part of the conversation, the fact of the matter is the Great Resignation has expanded, as you got to see in the opening video, into the lives of many career oriented based people as well, right? So this isn't just something that's relative to low wage workers. There are a lot of people in the law field, attorneys, architects, so on and so forth, professional level people who have opted to forego six-figure salaries because their value systems have changed as to this being more important to them. Many believe that the pandemic gave people a time to focus on the idea that their lives are short and that they should be happy in the things they do. It brought a lot of people closer to their family than it's ever been. And this, what was many believe based on automation, a looming issue that was meant to ensue either way. What happens in the Great Resignation is, or the pandemic, is this process gets sped up by the pandemic, but it was always going to happen, right? Anyway, right? And from many economists, many experts, many people across the globe, it is not so much a question of if or when. This is no longer a debatable conversation. It is almost kind of like the climate change argument, where many scientists now agree climate change is real and that it happens. Many in the creationist versus evolution communities now agree evolution is real. Automation and ideas like universal basic income or automation taking jobs and there needing to be the solution to that is real now as well. Um, on one hand, I feel I want to also just point out too, with Glendon Campbell's assessment of what's going on, people need to understand that when people talk about universal basic income from many standpoints, this isn't necessarily something that they wish would occur. Some people are under the false assumption that people just want to give people a lot of free money, and people don't want to work, or they don't want jobs or something like that, right? But I think the reality of the situation is we're beginning to learn that this is a much more complicated situation than that. That is not the core basis of why a UBI may need to be implemented, and more likely will be. Um, Now, when it does come to the idea of the revenge of the low wage worker, let's first explain a little bit about what that meant with somebody like Glendon Campbell, right? Or how we should think about that. In some examples he gave, this is a market now in the job economy for workers, meaning to say workers are now employees are now pulling all the strings. He gives an interesting example of where one employer runs a restaurant, I believe, uh, has employees that show up to work whenever they want, right? That they're taking advantage of the situation. And whereas in normal times, she would have just fired these people and got a better worker, the inability to find you know, people to replace these people, to retrain them, that people are resigning from jobs, makes it to the point they have to put up with these, employees that aren't fulfilling the role of the job correctly, right? That aren't being responsible employees and so on and so forth, right? And so it's very troubling to the employer from that standpoint. But let me give some reasons why, in this very revolutionary way, because remember, revolution actually comes about when there's something wrong in the world. And revolution in the Great Resignation, I don't think is coming about at a time that is any different. So I see the participants of the Great Resignation is not just lazy people who don't want to work or who want something for nothing or feel they deserve something for the world, but I actually am starting to see them now, as reasons I will express here shortly, as revolutionaries.
I'm free. I need everybody to repeat after me. I am a revolutionary. I am a revolutionary. I am a revolutionary. They can't never stop the party unless they stop the people. Well, ain't you high? Ain't you high? I'm high off the people. I'm high. I'm high. Ha, 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 ha. If you're there to struggle, you're there to win. If you're there not struggling, then goddammit, you don't deserve to win. I believe I'm gonna die half the people. I'm gonna die for the people because I live for the people. I live for the people.
So, feels like they're the revolutionaries, of this period of time. But to kind of understand this at a deeper level, let's first talk about capitalism in its modern definition, or at the core of its beginning after the Middle Ages, right? And a lot of ideas of how we view capitalism and the job economy today came about from Pope Innocent, uh, where he came up with this idea of what we call corporatism, basically. We call it capitalism, but it more so works like a neo-feudalist corporatist system. So let's explain what that means. Some would define capitalism as making money off the backs of others, right? If you really look at it and you think about it in that way, you're profiting off of somebody else's labor, and in many cases, you're profiting off of them more than they're profiting off themselves in our standard job economy. Now, if we were to really take a look at that and sit down and have a conversation about that, many people would walk away from that and with ideas in their mind like that isn't fair, right? At the core of this is what exists in this formation and creation of what we call modern day capitalism. And that is what spawns, I think, a lot of um, this very unsettled issue between employer and employee, right? The idea of not so much the lazy worker in the concept and the ideas of those in the Great Resignation, but the cheap employer, right? So that a lot of that comes about as well. Um, Now, I think, as we had underlined earlier, what we also have to look at then in a case like that is a lot of what's pushed the Great Resignation as well has to do with automation, right? Uh, what has happened, and oftentimes, is automation has given, I believe, the option for employers to now as well act in a way where they treat employees worse, because they can now opt to use this more so robotic economy, right? These machines that don't complain, so on and so forth. But in addition to that, what these robots and machines are enabling us to do, I think, is be in a more free state And that's where some of the excitement comes from automation. You go back to the original Czech definition of robot, where the word comes from. It means Slav or slave, right? So uh, in the robot economy, the robots do all the labor. What happens when you have this slave autonomous group that's doing all the labor? You're going to free up the rest of society. That's what happened in our earlier slavery, atrocious activities with human beings. Now, what's kind of exciting is this could be pushed on to these, what we deem, at least at this point, these non-human entities that won't tire, that won't be harmed in the performance of this, at least for now. I don't know what the future is going to bring with that. If you're big into science fiction, you might have different viewpoints of that. But as for right now, many of us would agree machines aren't alive. They're going to free up these human beings. Now, when that happens, uh, what's happening as we explore many different concepts is that it will be no point in people working at all. The children 20, 30 years from now, they're not going to work, as brought out in many of these videos and ideas, right? These people aren't going to work. Uh, the pandemic, going back to that, it helped people to explore what their value systems were, what was more important to us. As technology moves forward, we explore ideas like the metaverse, where you basically go into a virtual goods economy where there is an infinite supply of virtual goods, and their emotional satisfaction, psychological satisfaction to the humankind, where locking up resources, locking up food, keeping other people from eating makes no sense, right? Because your value system, when your belly can only hold so much, when you can only occupy a four-wall space at one time, you can only drive one automobile at one time, right? And I hope you guys are staying with me. This isn't going over many of you guys' heads. But in a virtual economy where goods can be produced exponentially, our value systems, I believe, will change with this abundance, this overabundance that pushes the market prices of items and products down to zero. Ideas like the 3D printer, where you can sit home and print as much of a good as you probably like or need, right? So many of these ideas of what we call work and the job, and even looking at the concept of why a low wage worker or even a career oriented person doesn't want to work anymore, and these employers are upset because they can't fill positions, they can't continue to make money off the backs of other people and take from other people. Those concepts won't matter in a future where it's a complete abundance in this way. And this is not a question of if, but it's just when. We know this is happening around us as it is right now. Um, what I think is going to need to happen in ideas like the Great Resignation, which is here, and which is going to get even worse than it is. What I think is going to have to happen is I tell this story many times where I went on a spiritual retreat years ago and it changed my life. One important message I took from that spiritual encounter was that you don't need to do anything, right? When it comes to, prior to that, I had lived a very Spartan life, worked for several Wall Street firms, and it was always duty and obligation, right? I felt I always had to be doing something. I always had to be setting goals. But the reality of the situation is all you have to do is live. If you're putting your value system in a job or work or something like that, I believe that is a mistake. That is going to have to be corrected. We're going to have to change our definition of work and a job. Maybe now a job becomes you go home, you be the best parent that you can be. That is a very needed area, and it's the most important job most of us are going to do. Maybe the focus needs to be there. This world is going to change greatly, right? And we might as well get prepared for it. I would say, in conclusion, I'm spearheading projects like Bitcoin NYK, Global Universal Basic Income Program, that is available to each and every one of you all for free. It moves value over the blockchain. I do think it's going to be important that isn't handled only on government levels, only on political levels, that this be also based community effort wise, where people take control of universal basic income programs that are going to help to lower crime, which is going to be needed, as we got to see broaden in these videos. And we focus on these solutions to solve this problem, because it's not going to go away. It's going to get worse. And for those of you all who are what I call misguided capitalists, misguided card carrying capitalists, like I used to be, right? Who are put your faith in that system. Remember what you're really doing at the end of the day. You're making money, and in most cases, more money off the back of others than the people are making. And these people aren't being fairly rewarded for it. And there's going to be a balance set to that, implemented to that, either through our political systems or through nature. Either way, it's going to come to fruition. Join projects like Bitcoin NYK today so we can, at the very least, go into this process the correct way, right? To create as less suffering and friction as possible. That's all I want to say in the video. If you like content like this, don't forget to like, subscribe. Until next time, as always, take care of yourselves and each other.